We've done 4 already, but now we're steady. And then they went 1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome, everyone, to the Audio Judo podcast.
Well, that was actually an excellent way to start.
Right?
So
topical. Because today,
what
we're
are we
talking
doing?
about Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy.
Houses of the Holy. And we are joined today by a very special guest, Kirby Grows. Is it Gross? Is it Gross?
It is. You can call it what you
Gross?
want. Yeah.
Oh,
It
excellent.
works.
You guessed his last name? You had no idea?
Just out of the blue. Like, I had no idea what it was. And I'm like, I'm getting a feeling here. It's Grows.
It's either Smith or Grows.
I'm going to go with B.
I don't sugarcoat it. It's gross. It is what it is.
Is it Gross?
Yeah.
All right. But he is our very special guest to talk about Houses of the Holy.
Right? Fantastic album. Why did you pick this one, Kirby?
I think for me, Over the Hills and Far Away was always my favorite Led Zeppelin song. And Houses of the Holy, I think, was the first Zeppelin album I picked up on vinyl. And so listening through it on vinyl just solidified it for me as like the Led Zeppelin album. So it felt like their first album of truly just them. And it really felt like it was something unique for them. And it felt like it was the first time they could do something completely on their own and prove that, they were still within the realm of one of the greatest bands in the world. So for me, Houses of the Holy, well-rounded album, gives you a little bit of everything. And
That's an excellent choice.
it'd be fun to talk about.
Take a look at where we're at in the Led Zeppelin catalog. All right. So we're coming out of a 4-album cycle. We got Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3, and then whatever you want to call the fourth one, Runes, Zoso, Led Zeppelin 4, or as Robert Plant refers to it, the 4th album, which is
That's very Robert Plant of him.
right. So you're coming out of this cycle with, Black Dog, Immigrant Song, Communication Breakdown, Days of Confused, Whole Lot of Love, like full of bombast, this rafter shaking, tinged with this Delta blues with a English rock spin on it, right? So Stairway had just been released, taking its place in history. They're starting to break the mold a little bit with the second side of Led Zeppelin 4. When the Levee Breaks is starting to break out of that mold. It has a completely different sound. There's pedal guitar. It's totally different. And then after Houses of the Holy, you have the West African tinged records, Physical Graffiti and Presence and stuff like that is trying to do something completely different. And this little gem sits in between those periods. And that's what I love about this record, is that the first 3-4 records, they were taking 15 hours to 12 weeks to record a record. They took 17 months to record Houses of the Holy. And clearly that space allowed them to breathe a little bit and start to compose instead of just riff rock in your face.
Yeah.
And
It's
not to draw a bad reference here to baseball, but to me, it seems like Houses of the Holy was taking someone who was a hurler, a thrower. He wasn't a pitcher yet. Houses of the Holy was them learning how to fine tune and really find a sound that was unique. But like you said, it wasn't that just earth shattering. The depth was just all the way to the moon, right? Well, now we get to bring it down, kind of bring it back to earth a little bit.
Page was still coming out of the Yardbird days.
Yeah.
Very riff-oriented and not necessarily compositional. And those first 4 records were so influenced by what Jimmy Page wanted them to be. And John Paul Jones started to assert his influence with that record. And John Paul Jones starts to bring this element in, the mellotron, and it changes the dynamic of how the band composes songs. So I'm going to read you something. I'm still not convinced this album is by the same group that brought us the likes of Communication Breakdown, Heartbreaker, and Black Dog. The powerfully simplistic rhythms and surging adrenaline drive that made those songs so compelling is nowhere to be found. Only once is it attempted on The Ocean, but there it's so diluted with pointless humor that the necessary musical tension never develops. 2 songs are naked imitations, easily the worst thing this band has ever attempted. The Crunge reproduces James Brown so faithfully that it's every bit as boring and repetitive and cliched as Good Foot. D-Maker is even worse, a pathetic stab at reggae that would probably get the Zepp laughed off the island if they bothered playing it in Jamaica. The truly original songs on House of the Holy again underscore Led Zeppelin's songwriting deficiencies. Dancing Days, The Rain Song, and No Quarter fall flat on their respective faces. The first is filler, while the latter two are nothing more than drawn-out vehicles for the further display of Jones' unknowledgeable use of mellotron and synthesizer. Page and friends should similarly realize their limitations, get back to playing the blues rock that moves mountains. Until they do, Led Zeppelin will remain limp blimp. This review...
I'm going to take a guess.
Yeah.
It's from Rolling Stone.
It is from Rolling Stone.
Hot take.
June 7th, 1973, 2 months after the record was released. Then, The Rain Song is 7 minutes of exquisite heartache, complete with mellotron strings from John Paul Jones. Ambitious and confident enough to believe they could meet any musical challenge, this album even includes a swinging take on reggae. The Ocean, the love song for Plant's baby daughter that closes the album, is a mighty stomp that could rattle the teeth of fans in the last row of Madison Square Garden. They had the largest crowds, the loudest rock songs, the most groupies, the fullest manes of hair. Eventually, excess would turn into bombast, but on Houses, it still proved inspiration. Also, from Rolling Stone, 30 years later,
Right.
which once again proves the point, nobody read Rolling Stone. It's a piece of garbage.
Correct. It's done. I mean, was there any, on that note, was there really any other band besides Led Zeppelin that was just hated as much by Rolling Stone? I mean, it just seemed like they just did not.
They really did not like Led Zeppelin.
They-
I don't
not
know
at
what
all.
the deal was.
They
but-
hated Rush for years too.
Oh,
And it was only at the tail end of the career did they finally get the respect that they deserve. They hated
so the
Rush.
largest music publication in the world, potentially,
Yeah.
hates good musicians, is what
Yeah,
we're trying
sort
to
of
say.
if you're
here.
not Elvis Costello or Radiohead, then you're shit to them.
Well, they were preparing for it. They
Right?
didn't know at the time.
And don't get me wrong, I listened to Elvis Costello and Radiohead, but for crying out loud, it's not like the Messiah came and just wrote "OK Computer." It's an okay record.
It's not Houses of the Holy, though.
Right.
Let's be real.
I do think it's interesting that they mention musical humor in their discussion of it, though, because in all the research that I was doing for this, a lot of times when they've interviewed band members from Led Zeppelin, they've all said the same thing. They're like, well, this song started out as a joke, and or this song, like Jamaica or Dire Maker, however you want to pronounce it.
You got to do. Come on, you have a British accent, Jamaica.
Well, so here's the thing. Do you want to go over that really quick? You know where that name came from, right?
I believe I have it in my notes somewhere, but go ahead.
It is an old bar joke, a Cockney bar joke, right? And the joke goes something like this. One guy says, my wife went away to the Caribbean. And the other guy says, Jamaica? And he says, no, she went of her own accord.
Exactly. So that
Because it would be pronounced, you read it in, an American reads it and it's
Dire Maker.
Maker.
What the hell is that?
But the way a Cockney person would pronounce it is Jamaica, as in, did you make her?
So the name's a bit of a joke. So what?
I think that it's been interesting to me to read that a lot of the musicians, as they were talking about it, they said, oh, this started out as a joke, or this started out, we were having fun and stuff. And I kind of wondered if that's not why this album sounds different than 1 through 4. They were having fun with it. They were literally like, hey, we're already successful. Let's do whatever the fuck we want.
Pretty much.
Let's make an album for us. And that's why it took so long. And that's why they had fun with it. And that's why they did all kinds of cool new stuff with it.
Yeah, they recorded it in a couple different places. Recorded at Stargrove's Manor, which Mick Jagger owned. And
No!
Yes! And then they recorded at Headley Grange, where they had recorded a lot of other stuff. But they were recording in the Stones' mobile studio.
Yeah.
Essentially, and so you had time, and they had taken enough time off that they could work on song ideas separately and then bring them together instead of being locked in a room for 12 weeks or whatever and like bang it out. Okay.
Robert Plant and Jimmy Page both had like home studios put in,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So they could work on stuff at home and like experiment at home. They
Which
could be
was
like,
rare back then.
Yeah. This is what, 1972 when they were
72,
recording?
yeah, 72,
And that
73.
the idea of a home studio, today it's a MacBook and 3 microphones. Yeah.
Right?
But
In
at
a
the time,
97-degree garage.
and a 97-degree garage, we could record an album
What
in
is
here.
this? A sweaty? It's no big
It's
deal.
96 degrees,
Oh,
Kirby.
yeah,
Come
right.
on,
Oh,
man.
I am very
on.
sorry.
How dare you?
But today it's like something easy. But at the time, you had to have equipment. You had to have somebody come in and maintain the tape machines. You had to have,
And tape.
you had to have tape.
Oh, yeah, we should start
Miles
there.
of tape.
Do you have any tape? No.
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 Oh, this is going to be a long
Oh,
process.
boy.
And I
Punch
believe that this would have been their last album before they launched their own record label, Swan
Yeah,
Song.
this was the
Yeah.
last Atlantic
So-
recording, yeah.
I think they had finally got to the point where they could stand up to Atlantic and they didn't feel like they had to abide by. Yeah, they could flip those birds.
To the double bird. And that's
And-
not two women. That's Matthew four-fingering somebody.
I beg your pardon?
Whoa,
Whoa, that's the double British bird.
sign me up. But you know what? I think with the time that they took to record it, and again, the very different stylistic approach, it really was the start of their own record label. So this may not have been the first album on their label, but I mean, you really could look at it like that because what's Atlantic going to do?
Oh, at this point, they're just like, give us something.
Give us something.
Oh, and by the way, it sold 11 million copies in the United
Yeah.
States, so yeah, that's pretty good. Thanks.
all right, thanks.
Thank you for that.
All right, let's talk about. Let's start at the beginning. Song remains the same, totally different than anything Page had done before. Those guitars are not distorted. Those are clean guitars right out of the gate, which is totally out of character for what he's doing. I mean, that song sets the table for what's to come as an experimental song. But then you follow it up with what I personally believe to be one of the top 10 rock songs ever written, In the Rain Song. I absolutely love everything about that song, and I have since I was 13 or 14.
I still can't believe like the song remains the same started out as an instrumental. Like that's how they started writing it. Jimmy Page wrote it as he composed it as a complete instrumental.
Yep.
It was originally called Overture, and then Robert Plant came in and was like, "No, I can write lyrics for this," and he wrote lyrics for it. And it's interesting to me to think like it would have followed that sort of instrumental introduction to them. And this would have been the instrumental introduction to this album that isn't. It has lyrics to it. And I think it makes it even a better song.
I agree.
Can you imagine had it not? It would have been crazy.
It kind of has, going back to Led Zeppelin 3, a little bit of immigrant song vibe. Right out the gate, I mean, you just get punched right in the face with it, even though it's not Page's typical overdriven, just, crunch. Just a tick of distortion, just a little bit of reverb, and it's very just sharp. And you don't really have a choice. I mean, you're blown right into it right away. And then, when Bonham comes in, you can't escape it. Now it's there. And it does pick up with lyrics, but you do still get that intro, that true musical intro to the album, even though it's going to continue the song. So
Well, it's got to be 90 seconds maybe before there's
a
any
solid,
lyrics?
Oh, at least.
a solid minute and a half.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the drums come with the big Ludwig, freaking 24-inch bass. It's just thuddy. And he's got his Lincoln Logs out.
Yep.
He's hitting with tree trunks.
I love the history of songs, but one of the other names, so this song had like 4 different names. So it was the Overture, and then it became the Campaign, and then it became Worcester and Plumpton Races.
I wish that would have been the name.
Which would have been the perfect name. It was named after
so much better.
Jimmy Page and Robert Plant's respective estates, apparently in England, before they changed
I
it
think
to The
that's
Song Remains the
pronounced
Same.
Worcester.
Worcester, excuse me. Worcester.
That would have been so much better than Song Remains the Same.
Right?
What are you listening to, Matt? Worcester and Plumpkin?
Worcester and Plumpton Races.
What? You heard me. That's what I'm listening to.
Did I stutter?
Yeah.
It's like you said, Kirby. It's still an introduction. It's still like a non-verbal introduction to the album, and then it becomes even more of a song as it's going on.
And a guilty pleasure for me, actually, that is a song that I actually prefer live over the studio album. I do like a lot of Led Zeppelin songs live, but I can appreciate the studio version. But I actually think, even though they can't pick up the same layering that you get off the studio album version, I do quite enjoy the live rendition
Did
of
they
it.
play that on the Song Remains the Same video? The Madison Square Garden?
Yes.
Yeah. It is in the concert video? I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I'm sure. I
Being
believe
the title video, I would hope so.
Well, but the song "Houses of the Holy" is not on the
not
record.
on Houses of the Holy. They didn't think it was good enough.
They just kicked it down to Physical Graffiti,
Actually, I think it fits fine on Physical Graffiti too.
punted it down the road.
They just punted it to that next album. That's fine.
So, first time I listened to this record, and actually I didn't listen to it on record. I listened to it on cassette first time. So I had listened to all the other Led Zeppelin catalog by that point. This one remained the outlier that I hadn't listened to it yet because my brother, who was my main musical influence growing up, didn't have this particular one in his collection. He had 1 through 4. He had Presence and Physical Graffiti and Coda, but this one didn't exist to my knowledge. I did eventually find it, and it was such like an awakening knowing the rest of the catalog, how this laid in there. And it was so eye-opening. Like the first 3 tracks alone, you could have stopped right there. It could have been Led Zeppelin's EP, and you could have just released those 3 and been like, I'll call it a day.
Well, if they were around now, they would do that.
Oh, I know.
Or just put it on iTunes.
Yeah, just record one and put it out there and be like, oh, there you go.
Buy it.
Yeah. There you go. Make us $1 gajillion.
Make us $1 gajillion.
Just make it happen.
That's funny that this was the last Zeppelin album that you listened to, because it was the first Zeppelin album I listened to. Really? And I found it when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I was digging through. My dad had this brown, it almost looked like a little suitcase. It was brown leather, and it was a cassette holder. And I remember it was in our basement with a bunch of boxes and stuff. And I was like, what is that? And I was going through it, and I was looking at every album, or every cassette that was in there. And a bunch of them I pulled out, and I'm like, whatever. And then I pulled that one out, and I was like, naked people on the cover. I have to listen to this.
And what's this?
Oh boy.
I can't imagine listening to it at 6 or 7 years old and having any concept of
I had no idea what it was. But I do remember listening to it. And what was crazy was the very first song, because obviously it's a cassette, so it was wherever it was when I put it in the tape player. The first song I heard was The Ocean. I think it was just a little bit of the ending of No Quarter and then The Ocean. And I was like, wow, that's great. And my dad, later on, I was like, I was listening to this earlier. What is this? And he's like, oh yeah, don't ever listen to that again. That's like adult music. You don't want to listen to that.
Yeah, don't listen to that.
But I still remember doing that when I was a kid. And then later on, coming back when I was a teenager and being like, didn't he have that cassette somewhere? Where was that? And finding it and listening to it again and being like, God, this is amazing.
Right?
This is so, this is like next level stuff. An awakening to like the entire world of rock and roll.
Kyle had a musical awakening.
Had a musical awakening.
Epiphany, very young.
So teenage cool. Epiphany.
So I remember arguing with a classmate of mine, so like 14 years old or so, about who the bigger influence on music was historically, Beatles or Led Zeppelin. Ooh. And of course I naively, but mostly because I like to argue, took the Led Zeppelin side of it. And we all know Beatles have influenced every aspect of pop music, from packaging to how albums are recorded to layering to studio tricks to all that stuff. They were pushing the envelope before the envelope even existed because of the money they had. But if you talk about hard rock influences, there's not another one that compares to what Led Zeppelin put on the map.
Oh, no way.
And that's why, like, I can listen to a Black Sabbath record, I can listen to a Deep Purple record and stuff. These bands did not take chances like Zeppelin took chances. They had a formula, and they executed the formula, for better or for worse. But Zeppelin took hard rock composition and turned it on its ear. And a lot of it goes back to what they were doing experimentally on this record. Like No Quarter, when they recorded it and then they were using Verispeed to take it down, like just enough to make it sound a little bit slower when you listen to it, and what Paige said, it was to make it more ominous, to make it thicker, spookier. And that's, to me, that's like a straight out of the Beatles playbook trick, is to do that. But not doing it for I Am the Walrus, but doing it for like a song like No Quarter that has so much texturing and different feels. It wasn't a pop song at all. Never wanted it to be a pop song. It was a piece that ended up living in their live stuff for years, forever. Again, this is one that I agree with you on. It does sound better live, even that one. And
actually, No Quarter's one. I really like both. I prefer Song Remains the Same live, or Wooster, but No Quarter, from a performance aspect, just the way that, even though the song is so layered on the album, but they were still able to translate it live. Mm-hmm. And the theremin cry, that just, I mean, just again, I mean, you're watching something magical happen, and it's really just a guy with a amplified antenna. But,
Sure. But he made it sing.
But he made it sing and cry, and you couldn't. It's interesting to me that song was slowed down. I was reading that too, and I didn't know that prior to my research with this. But I don't know if you can make that song creepier. I don't know, and
No, I don't think so.
It'd be very difficult.
it would be difficult.
There's a mood there. That, I mean, they captured whatever mood they were going for. They absolutely nailed it.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's what's crazy too, is that's one of their most covered songs. Like I
No
wrote,
quarter?
yeah, I wrote it down, and it's so just the list on Wikipedia. It's been covered by bands Crowbar, Page and Plant, Led Zeppelin, Great White, Gravedigger, McTub, Tool, Star One, The Section, Quidam, Aaron, Exhumed, Sly and Robbie, The Flaming Lips, and Government Mule.
Okay, so two of those bands I need to hear. I need to hear the Flaming Lips version because it's probably ridiculous.
Yes.
And then
I've heard that one.
what's the other band you said? A Great White.
Great White. That one I have not heard.
I kind of want to hear that just for the hell of it because it's got to be ridiculous.
I've heard the Tool version. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because No Quarter is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. I'm going to keep the original on that one.
Right.
But
no, I'm with you.
But I mean, it is kind of amazing that a song that wasn't necessarily a huge commercial success for them has been as popular from other bands, and it's been such an influence. So it is pretty incredible just to see the reach that song has had, and it's so complex too. I give credit to bands even trying to do it. As much as I love the song, I don't know if I would do it. There's too much to it. But
that's got to be terrifying to take something that's like so iconic and so good and be like, yeah, and we're going to cover it.
We're going to do that now.
Yeah, we're going to do that now. It's going to be so much better.
You got to have a set of nuts on you to do that. That's just, I don't have them for sure.
Talk about Great White. I don't.
Yeah, well, okay. But, hey, once bitten, twice shy, baby. It's great. It's a great.
Plus, producer Randy got his hand on his head.
Randy almost
What's
died.
the problem here?
We need a mic for Randy just so when you laugh,
You could just
at our
put that in
stupid
there.
shit.
Can you just
can
can
just hear
some
in the
laughter
background.
and just insert it in there? That's how Randy laughs, and
Yeah.
I'm sticking to it.
He doesn't have a mic, so you won't know.
Exactly.
This is the part where he edits me into saying something like "I like poop" or something.
Well, now you've just given him the clip.
Now I gave him the clip.
He doesn't
so
even have
I'm
to edit
such
it.
an
He
idiot.
just said it.
Damn it! All right,
Yes.
Rain song.
Rain
Almost,
song.
excuse me, that was my bad. Rain song, not the Rain song.
What about it? So the only reason it was ever written is
George
because
Harrison.
George Harrison said to John Bonham, "How come you guys don't write any ballads?" And he's and he told Jimmy Page, and Jimmy Page is like, "Oh yeah, I'll write a ballad."
Screw
First of
you,
all-
George Harrison.
First of all, hold on. Did he not listen to Led Zeppelin 4? You trying to tell me Going to California is not a ballad?
right?
Like it's more ballad than the Rain song ends up being by the end.
is.
So maybe he wasn't listening. But anyway,
Maybe he wasn't. Let's think about that conversation. George Harrison is going to come up to John Bonham
yeah, I want to be a fly on the wall or
and
anything.
say, "You need to do more ballads." Can you just just think about that?
And Bonham's like in between
Yeah,
14 shots of vodka
Yeah.
saying, "Fight me."
ballads.
Ballads.
Yes.
Ballads.
We don't
gotta
do
find-
no stinking ballads."
But apparently it's stuck. I mean,
yeah,
the decision was made at some
Hey,
point. But
told Page. Page is like, oh, yeah. And so the first two chords are direct lifts from Something by the Beatles.
And you don't mean something generically. You mean the song.
I mean something. Yes, something in the way she moves. That one. Yeah, it's direct lifts, and that's Page's like message to him. So I don't write ballads. All right, here you go. First two chords.
There's actually a fantastic quote. Sadly, it's in Rolling Stone, but I'll quote it anyways. Let's see here. Following what the band Led Zeppelin's one of their 3-hour concerts in Los Angeles, a suitably impressed Harrison warmly greeted Zeppelin backstage by exclaiming, "Fuck me." With the Beatles, we were on for 25 minutes and I could get off in 15. But for all of the compliments, the so-called quiet Beatle was apparently disappointed by Zepp's dearth of quiet numbers. George was talking to Bonzo one evening and said, "The problem with you guys is that you never do ballads. Page told biographer Brad Tolinsky, I said, I'll give him a ballad, and I wrote Rain Song, which appears on Houses of the Holy. In fact, you'll notice I even quote something in the song's first two chords. Fuck me.
There you have it.
I'm George Harrison. Fuck me. That's the tagline for this episode. I'm George Harrison. Fuck me. It's an episode about Led Zeppelin. I don't know why I'm Australian. Nobody does.
Yeah, you lost it there.
I lost it.
did.
English, Scottish, Australian. You kind of just roll up it all into one.
I have I have a thing. I can do any accent for 7 seconds.
Right, and then he loses it.
Gone.
And then it's gone
forever.
Gone forever.
It's very weird.
I mean, he doesn't even have to practice it normally.
Right.
It'd be like, Michael Caine, go. And he'll give you 7 seconds and then nothing. And he's like, I don't even remember who I was doing. I don't know what that was.
Why do we fall down, Mr. Wayne?
So,
And it's gone.
yeah, that's it.
See, there you go.
I can't finish the line. I can't finish that line. Yeah.
The Rain Song.
Rain Song.
Rain Song.
Into Over the Hills and Far Away.
Oof.
Which I still think, in personal opinion, obviously, I think this is one of the most iconic rock songs of all time.
The riff is that 12 string?
There is
outset?
12 string.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the first songs I learned on guitar. Not to the proficiency that Mr. Page would play,
Oh.
but
How disappointing.
without a doubt, I mean, that was a song that influenced me growing up, and then wanting to play guitar. There's a lot of influences, but that was one that I just knew I had to learn that song. And even though my skills have definitely atrophied through the years, I still will bust that one out. It's kind of the brings you back in.
Yeah.
And no matter what, I will always come back to that song. And
Do you play it
enjoy
at parties and bar mitzvahs? Is that
I no longer do it at bar mitzvahs.
oh,
No.
okay. That's
Parties
probably a good
sometimes. Divorce parties. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you change the lyrics to be about the divorce?
I'll do whatever they pay me
Hey,
to do.
Sadie, get the fuck out of my house.
It's beautiful.
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna take that one.
Yeah, we're gonna write that down for later. But it is an iconic song.
It is.
And you're not expecting it, like that bright sound right at the top, and leads into just like a funky, dirty song right after.
And you almost think you're getting another ballad. You kind of get that vibe off the start. You're going, okay, we
Like,
just
ooh.
had Rain Song,
More British folk rock.
but Jimmy Page said, no, I'm only going to give you one folk song,
Just one.
just one, and they go right into it. And that chorus just hits so heavy, and again, not as overdriven as say Heartbreaker or A Whole Lot of Love, something like that, but the tempo picking up and just the dynamics of it, those hard crashes, I mean, and the transitions, everything just really just, like I said, that was probably what drew me to Houses of the Holy in general, because that was the song that got me into Led Zeppelin.
Awesome. So what song is next, Kyle?
Next up is the grunge. I had no idea going in to do the research for this that this was supposed to be them kind of, I don't want to say make a fun of James Brown, but imitating James
Imitating.
Brown.
Yeah.
And it's the minute you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense
Absolutely.
now that I listen to this song.
I mean, so dirty. That bass line is just
Filthy.
It is filthy. It is. I love it. That's a plant at his apex. Because I feel after this record, the toll of drugs and alcohol,
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
right?
The
and,
show.
and how many shows they had been doing was taking its toll on his voice. It was definitely shredding it for the next couple albums. So this is where he's at,
He hit that peak.
right? Where everything just sounds solid. And even in that song, where it's just all over the place vocally.
You know, those were all improvised the first time, right?
No, I
all
did
the,
not
all
know
the
that.
lyrics were improvised the first time. And then they kind of went through and listened to the recording and cleaned it up just a little bit. And he changed some stuff around and repeated some things in it. And that's how they ended up with the final product.
In that review that I chucked across the room, this guy, he said, astoundingly idiotic lyrics.
Yes.
When she walks, and when she talks, she talks. Apparently, he doesn't care for that.
Well, look, nobody's going to, I think, reasonably tune to the grunge or roll into the grunge and go, "Oh man, this is Led Zeppelin." No, but that is the beauty of it. You have a song and you have a groove and I don't even know what time signature that they're running with there.
It's. I used to know this. It was like they were playing two separate. The drums were playing 5/4/7/4, and the guitars were playing 4/4/5/4.
That just hurts my head.
So they were catching up eventually.
That just hurts my head.
They would catch
That's
up and cross
weird.
over eventually. So yeah, I remember we worked it out in jazz band class one day, trying to figure it out, and I'm like,
Nerd alert.
shut up. What the hell was that? What?
My jazz band wasn't that good.
Oh no, ours was good. You can only play Birdland so many times.
You can only play Birdland so many times, but we didn't know that.
Oh really?
Also, what a fantastic end to the A side of this album.
It's
Where's
almost
that
its own
confounded bridge?
It's its own
And then it's just
closer.
dead quiet.
Yep. And then you get the.
Yeah.
I have to admit, when I was invited to do this, which if I haven't thanked you already, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
But when I was invited to do this and we had discussed this, that weekend I put this album on vinyl and had a vinyl night and listened to it. And my girlfriend knows I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. She herself is not a huge Led Zeppelin fan, but the crunge, you could just kind of see the look. She just doesn't really know what's happening. And then, where's that confounded bridge? And that is
Just like what?
that is the best way to just,
What just happened?
and it just let it roll. Just go.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. It's over. Just let it hang there for a
See?
second.
You let it hang and you let the dog fur get picked up by the needle one more time, and then you go rotate the album. Fantastic way on such a you could say maybe goofy or parody song, but
Yeah.
don't care. Wouldn't take it out.
Right?
Personally.
It fits so well with everything else on here. And then on the B side, just boom, right into Dancing Days. And it's such a, like, it's different than everything that was on the A side. It really is. It's like a dance song. You go from something that's got a weird timing and it's basically impossible to dance to. That is basically a dance song. I mean, you lead right into it on the next side of the album. It's great.
Lyrically, I actually quite enjoy that song, and it's interesting. I couldn't tell you where that sits from a singles perspective for Zeppelin, but I can say in the radio rotation now, I hear that song just as much as I do some of their bigger hits. You know, your
Really?
Black Dog, your Cashmere, stuff like that. I feel like I do. Maybe I'm somewhat biased to it because I've always liked the song. And talking about covers, I think we would really be doing a disservice if didn't bring up good old STP. I mean,
Yeah, that's an actually pretty faithful cover.
and I like the fact that it's stripped down. I actually think that it being stripped down really draws out just that easygoing vibe that song had. I mean, it told a story. Lyrically, it told a story. You told your mother I would get you home, but you didn't say that I had no car. I mean, I think everybody's had that plight at some point.
Something similar. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, maybe I didn't have my bicycle. Maybe that was my problem. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but a great song, and like I said, a great story out of the song, I think. And it's we keep talking about it being different, and it is very different. You've got something that just you've got the A side ends just so abruptly and just what the hell just happened, and then you just pick right up. It's kind of like its own intro again. It's like you've got another number one song. You've got another song that the guitar hits you right off. Nice driving beat, but it's not overpowering. So I'm a fan of it. Some purists I know aren't, but that's fine.
Jamaica.
Yeah. Jamaica.
I've always loved that song.
See, I'm going to combat you here.
Yeah?
Don't care for it.
You don't care for it,
That's the only. I mean, the problem is that this album is so good that this song couldn't ruin it for me. So it's okay. I don't
That's
hate
true.
it. I think I've heard it enough, and I think for me personally, I think I just always wanted to get to know Quarter so bad. So I just.
That is typically how it goes.
You're like, I got to listen through this again.
But what the crazy thing about it, though, I consider this the weakest song on the album, and it still beats the best of what a lot of other bands are doing. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, I agree with
it's
that.
fine. So, who am I to criticize?
What do you got written down there, Kyle?
Yeah, you got a lot of notes over there.
I do. But I already told you this one, where the name for
Oh,
Jamaica
yeah, you did.
came from.
Yeah, you already did that.
That's just the notes I've got for that. And then leads into No Quarter.
I mean, if we're going to No Quarter, I'll talk about it again.
Yeah, let's talk about
Don't
it again.
even care.
Let's do it.
Another song that during my learning of guitar, it's not an overly difficult song to play on guitar, but achieving the sound, achieving the dynamics, and achieving just that. It's hard to do because we're not using a utility to slow the entire track down. You can't slow your guitar playing down as you go, but kick up a lot of flange. You use a good wah pedal. And I'm an effects junkie. So when I was learning, I would spend more time messing with the effects. And I still do this, unfortunately. It's a fault of mine. I'll spend more time playing with the effects than I do actually learning the song. So
One effects processor, or you got 19 pedals on the floor?
no, I would do, I'm an effects junkie, but I must want a budget. So multi-board and a good wah pedal. And I would have a good Dunlop wah pedal. And that's 85% of it. Get a good flange, something with some modulation, kick up some reverb, and just let it scream. And I just loved it. Still do. I'm gonna probably go home and play it. And that's not true. I'll do it tomorrow. But
you are going to be getting home kind of late. So
yeah,
you
just crank up the volume.
My neighbors are pretty cool.
See?
But probably not that cool. But the other thing for me on this, I talk about the guitar part, and as a guitar player and a drummer, I pick up on those, and I pick up a lot of the guitar that comes out of that song. But this is John Paul Jones, no doubt. This is him, and you just hear him, those chords that he plays, kind of on that offbeat, just a little bit off and just subtle. It's not overpowering. You take it out, though, the song is ruined. So I think that's what to me is really amazing about it, is you could take something that if you didn't have it in there, the song is completely different. It loses that mood. It loses that vibe. And he's a mastermind. And that I read that same Rolling Stone interview or that article that you brought up earlier, and cracks me up to think that someone would even write something about how he doesn't have composition skills.
Right.
What are you talking about?
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
He doesn't. And that was definitely it would be laughed off today. But unfortunately then though, you didn't have anything else to go off of. So it's kind of amazing Led Zeppelin's tenure and success was as good as it was, because they sure didn't get much love from the music community.
Yeah.
From publications, at least.
He refers to it as spinning absolutely superfluous electronic fills.
Uses big words to say nothing.
Right?
Okay. Cool.
But that's fancy.
Fancy.
Somebody's got an English degree.
So then
closes out with the ocean,
which we talked about before.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, okay. Again, so I think No Quarter really draws in the aspiring songwriter in me that I was never there for, and the guitar player in me that I would love to be. If I had to pick one thing out of the ocean, the time signature changes. Even now, I have to do it as a feel, because I can't count it out. I can count out a lot of the music I play. I can't count it out. I admittedly just go, how the hell did these people do this? And they were so fucked up too. Like,
was it 4/4/7/8?
You'd have common time 4/4 and 7/8.
7/8.
So you would have a 4/4 4/4 7/8 4, and you're just like
alternating measures of 4/4/7/8 4/4. Yeah,
and maddening. I mean, to look at it on a piece of sheet music is just absolutely maddening. But the end result and the product is just amazing. And this is one of my favorite live songs from Led Zeppelin. Again, a lot of their stuff is really good live, but I think this one they always captured really well. It's upbeat, and the other thing, both on the studio and live, I know Bonham leveraged a lot of like rim shots and just get that really loud staccato, just pop, pop, pop. That snare just always popped out a lot on this song. In an era where the snare almost just had to be like fat and rattly. For me, I'm a snare junkie too. So just to hear something completely different, just a nice staccato, just, I don't know. It was always just a big thing for me.
Sound of his drums is on this song especially. It's just fantastic.
It's loud and it's out there, but it's not an abrasive track. So a great way to close out an incredible album. And it's fun. I mean, how could you not have fun listening to this song?
I don't know.
That doo-wop influenced ending, man.
Yeah.
Just
And like, where the hell does it come from? Doesn't matter. Fits.
It fits perfect.
Fits it so well.
Not according to Gordon Fletcher.
Well, Gordon
Fletcher.
He didn't care.
Felch my
he didn't care for it.
Well, that's fine. I do have to point out the very hard to hear, and on the remastered version, I think they really tried to get this out. But does anybody know about the telephone?
What are you talking about?
A minute 35, minute 36 on the track. You can, if it really works best if you have headphones.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of that instrumental bridge, there's a telephone that rings. It's definitely a phone or a doorbell or something. Interviews with like Page and Plant said it could have happened, but I don't think it did. But you could definitely hear it.
I read an interview later, like somewhere around, I want to say like 1990, where Page said, yeah, there was definitely a phone. And he said now it would be much easier to take out, but it was like, meh, we're just going to leave it
It's
in there.
there now.
Right?
And if I'm sure they're probably almost out of tape. That was probably the issue. They probably like, don't want to have to go to the store and buy more tape.
Right.
But sometimes if the take that you have is just that good,
you want to overlook some anomalies in there. Like,
and it's also fun too, because again, like we discussed earlier, this was their own swan song from a big record label that they'd outgrown. I mean, it's crazy to think that they outgrew Atlantic, but they did. So
to say that
leave it
this is their swan song before
the swan song.
Ooh.
Absolutely. It was.
That's deep.
There's one more iconic piece of this album that we have to talk about.
We're going to talk about the album cover, aren't we?
We got to talk about the album cover because it is it's definitely in the top 5 most iconic album covers of all time. I mean, everybody recognizes it the minute like I said, the first time I saw it, I was like 6 or 7 years old and I was like, naked people. Yeah.
That's so provocative.
My notes on this, I literally wrote down, Matthew already knows everything. Just pretend like you wrote a lot of notes for this.
Oh, good.
That's
a good note.
Right?
So
Solid.
these are, it's a brother and a sister. That's the only 2 people that were models for this. Where it was a brother and sister from England. The boy actually grew up to host several cooking shows on the BBC.
Ooh.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Gates, I think it might be their last name. But so it's a brother and a sister, and they took them up to a place called Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland that has these kind of rock structures like that. And the goal was to get a sunrise and sunset picture. Originally was Storm Thurgeson from Hypnosis, which is the company that I've talked to you about.
Yes.
It's like the massive 70s and 80s creative album cover unit. So it was Storm Thurgeson and Aubrey Powell. Storm Thurgeson had an idea for the record cover that he wanted to have like an electric green tennis court with a racket sitting on it. And Jimmy Page is like, "Whoa, you think our music's racket?" And he fired him immediately. So they hired the other guy, Aubrey Powell, to do it. So Aubrey Powell takes him up there, says, "I want a sunset and a sunset or a sunrise and a sunset picture for it." And it proceeded to rain for 10 straight days. So he's like, "Oh, we still got to do it." So they would like drag this brother and sister out to climb on the rocks in the morning and in the evening, looking for this picture. And he took a bunch of pictures and was trashed on Quaaludes and booze, trying to just get through the whole thing. And
what a time to be alive.
Right? And they ended up taking it back to process it in their studio. And he wanted like this kind of gray, like steel look for it. And it ended up with this odd pinkish hue to it from the processing. And they left it that way. And they just multiple exposure. That's why there's 7 kids on it, but it's actually just the same 2. And it's one of the happy,
You're telling me these weren't centuplets that they just threw out there. Okay.
They're just happy. It was just a happy accident how that album the cover came together.
And that's their real hair, right?
Yes.
A lot of people have speculated that they were kids in wigs.
No.
That's their real hair.
Yeah, that's their hair. And I read an interview with the boy, and he thought he had never listened to the record ever, like even all these years later.
Wow.
He hadn't listened to it because he felt like it was kind of spooky and like there was a weight to it. So they actually drove back up there when he was in his 40s, and he listened to the record and hung out there and felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders because he always kind of felt like weighed down by that experience.
Oh, that's so cool.
But he said that him and his sister just like climbing on rocks, and they're like naked, but they're like, we're like 6 and 8 years old. It's like, okay, it's not a sexual thing. It's just like, yeah. And everyone thought there was some kind of spooky, weird occult element to it. And it's like, no, just a bunch of kids climbing on rocks. So anticlimactic.
Maybe that is the best way to summarize how the album came together musically. it's kind of an eclectic combination of them really experimenting with a lot of things that they had not done, and things that somebody undoubtedly said they should not do.
Oh, definitely.
Or that's not going to work. Oh, we got Kids on Rocks. That's not going to work. Well, clearly.
Yeah, clearly it worked because it won a Grammy like the following year for best album design. So, I mean, clearly that worked. And it sold 11 million copies. So clearly the music worked. So what's the problem, Rolling Stone?
We're really picking on Rolling Stone this episode. They're really going to come down on us hard.
I'm trying to get their attention.
That makes sense.
I think,
start a feud with them.
I couldn't say if they've specifically said it in regard to this, but I do believe that they've posthumously said, our bad. I do think that they've done that at some point.
Well, yeah, because
a little late though. I mean,
because they don't want all of us hating them. They want all of us still.
I
remember when you said that.
Remember when?
It's on the internet. It lives forever.
Well, it does now because now you have a copy.
I know.
Of it.
I printed it out.
Yep.
And highlighted
it.
The only other thing that I wrote down in here notes was, have either of you listened to the deluxe edition of this?
Yes.
It came out in 2014.
Yes.
And it's got a whole second CD to it if you buy it on CD or on iTunes. It's, obviously a bunch more tracks, but they're alt takes of almost every single song on here.
Mm-hmm.
Or a couple of them are like guitar only versions, or, it's fascinating to listen to more from like a how these songs were created standpoint. So if you're out there and you're going to go listen to this album, grab the deluxe edition, because the whole first 8 tracks are just remastered versions of the originals. So they sound great. And then there's 8 more tracks on there that are alt takes of every song on there. It's fantastic.
And I can only hope that in due time, they release more content like that. For so long, I know Page and Plant were just against doing really anything like that, because it was basically what was behind the curtain was behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, I don't want to say notorious, but I mean, their career was cut short. Well, the collective, the band's presence was definitely cut short with Bonham.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to respect that. You have to know that wasn't going to continue. But almost to a fault, they would not put something out that didn't represent them. And it really is a testament to their success that stuff doesn't exist. But at the same time, I think we deserve it now. And I think we could look at it and see, in the body of work, it doesn't negatively impact their body of work for what it still is.
Yeah.
But it can maybe help tell us like what could have been, and maybe appreciate it more to say, hey, that was rough, but it led into this.
I think you're going to see more and more of that as the years progress, like alternate takes and stuff without the keys or stuff without certain layering and stuff. And I think I agree with you. I think at this point, what are you holding it back for?
Yeah.
Like your integrity is not being compromised.
They're still doing it.
Right, but your integrity is not being compromised. Everyone knows you're legends, and you're not hurting your
status,
your status, or your history. You're not impacting the history of what Led Zeppelin was by releasing that kind of stuff.
The other thing they have to realize too is, as they're getting older, they either release it now so they can still comment on it, or it gets released posthumously after they've gone. And I feel like as if you're an artist, probably want that released while you're still alive, so you can actively say, oh yeah, this was an alternate take to this song and we didn't pick it because X, Y, and Z, versus having it come out after your death and everyone has to speculate why you didn't do that, or why did you change what you changed.
And if it's going to come out after the fact, you're never going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
Someone else is going to be holding the keys to that at that point. So if you have an opportunity to benefit from an alternate track, why not do it while you're still alive, so you can reap the rewards, as it were?
So let's wrap this baby up.
Okay.
You guys want to? You got any final thoughts on it?
No, I've said my piece. I think it's the highlight of the Led Zeppelin catalog for me. I could listen to it all day, all the time, and not get tired of it. Where the earlier stuff is a little too raw, and then the later stuff is a little too dense to kind of break into, to listen to over and over again, where this is just it sounds fresh every time I listen to it.
This, I think, was the peak of their listenable creativity. And as much of a fan I am of Led Zeppelin, their later stuff is kind of it's an acquired taste, and I really had to I really want to just dive into the outdoor. Not that there's not great songs, and
It's tough.
I know, but this really is. I think it's hard to label anything as their best work or they're this or they're that, but I think you have to look at it and say this is I think arguably the best blend of where they were at the time, and where music was just in general, and they pushed those boundaries, and they were not afraid to take chances, but the thing is they didn't take any chances that didn't work out. Everything worked.
I definitely think it's like a quintessential rock album. And not only is it, I totally agree with you, Kirby. It's right in that spot where it's not their early stuff, and it's not the more experimental later stuff. It's very accessible. I think that you could play this for anybody, and they would at least find one or two tracks on here that they love.
Of course.
It's a great album.
I agree. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Kirby for joining us today.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Our pleasure, and we hope you will join us again in the future.
Oh yeah.
And
next time we talk about a Zeppelin album, maybe.
I'll phone it in.
oh, that's smart.
Yeah, I'll phone. Yeah, because you probably don't need to do another full album, but we can phone in and I'll just discuss a track.
Oh, that's fair. We could do that. So if anyone out there has comments for us or some disagreements,
yes,
or you guys suck and Led Zeppelin 4 is the best rock album of all time and want you to blow it out your ass, please feel free to email us at info@audiojudo.com. Go to our social media on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and track us down and comment. We want comments. We want feedback. We want to hear.
Yes, please.
We have to say. We want to hear. Oh my gosh, that Kirby guy's got a really sexy voice. How do I get in touch with that
Unless you're
guy?
from Rolling Stone.
Oh, you're probably not going to like me,
Yeah.
Rolling Stone, but you know what?
No.
Suck it.
Tupelo.
But
Yeah.
we are glad you tuned in today or this evening.
One last thing we got to ask, because I know
Kyle's got
guests are kind of a new thing for us. You got anything you want to plug, Kirby?
I have nothing I'd like to plug
All right.
other than my friendship.
So if you want to be friends with Kirby, send $10.99
Yeah.
to. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not in the double digits yet. $7.99 works.
$7.99 works.
No, the opportunity to
$7.99
come
per
here
minute.
and talk music and kind of talk shop, if you will, getting into one of my favorite bands and easily one of my favorite albums and a big influencer for me. And it's an incredible opportunity. So I would just like to plug the fact that I was able to sit down with you gentlemen tonight and discuss it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's
Yeah,
our
it was
pleasure.
fun. Yeah.
So for Kyle, I will bid you adieu and check out www.audiojudo.com for upcoming episodes and to give us your feedback and any future episode suggestions that you might have. And good night.
I'm George Harrison. Fuck me.